Welcome to a live conversation on ALLATRA TV Island. On these live broadcasts, we have conversations with people all around the world to ask them what type of world they would like to live in. They offer their ideas and suggestions for living in a creative society. These conversations are being conducted as part of the Creative Society project, which was created by ALLATRA IPM, International Public Movement. The goal of the Creative Society project is to build and sustain a creative society by peaceful means. A creative society is where each person in the world will live happy, feel safe, and have enough resources for living an abundant life. This is also a society that is secure, stable, and where a person is confident in their future and the future of next generations. There is also unity across all nations, races, and religion. By conducting interviews with people from all around the world, we are currently implementing the first stage of building such a society, and this is called the informational stage. You can find more information on the project on ALLATRAunites.com. So my name is Parvin, and my co-host today is Eleanor. So Eleanor, could you please introduce our lovely guest?
Yeah, sure. Hello, dear friends, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest for today, Dr. Bob Choat. Bob, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And we know that you are a mindset trainer, psychologist, and neuroscientist, and you are U.S. Marine vet and ex-police officer. You are martial arts instructor. So many occupations in your life. Could you please tell a little bit more about yourself and what drives you in your life?
Yes. So a little bit about me. I think it stems from my mother. She really instituted and instilled a sense of purpose. Now, it was more of being a protector and a warrior. My father was just the opposite. So I had the abuse from my father and everything growing up, and I had to deal with a lot through him. And my first broken nose was actually from him. My mom wanted me to become a warrior to be able to deal with that because being Japanese, my mother was here in the States, and she couldn't leave us to my father, and she couldn't divorce him because she would have been sent back to Japan back in those days, and me and then later my siblings would have been under his control. So she started teaching me martial arts when I was 18 months old, teaching me kendo. Then when I lived in Okinawa from age 5 to age 8, I studied Okinawan karate, a system known as Goju. And this is going back to the 1950s. Then I studied with my uncle in Japan, both judo and kendo. He was a master in both. And he was an officer with the Japanese Army during World War II. And he also started at age 5 as well, in terms of his former martial arts training. And he studied under the founder of judo, Jigoro Kano. And in my case, I really wanted to be that, like Superman. Back in the 1950s, there was a series called Adventures of Superman. I wanted to be that. So I tried everything that I could to be Superman. I put on a towel like a cape, had the S drawn on it. And I found out that no matter what I tried, I couldn't fly. And I couldn't lift the table up. I stood up on the table, tried to jump off of that. And I figured, well, maybe I have to go somewhere higher. I wanted to climb up on the roof of the house. My mom stopped me from doing that, from jumping off the roof. Yeah. So.
Yeah, rightly so.
Yeah. So that laid a foundation for later on in terms of whether it's some martial arts. And there was Bugs Bunny cartoon that I watched years ago again, when I was a kid, and Bugs Bunny was super bugs, but when he lost his superpower, he joined the United States Marine Corps. And so I figured maybe that's where my part of my power is at. So I ended up going into the Marines. I was a 17-year-old infantry, which is grunt. We call them the grunts, 0311. And then I got indoctrinated into Force Recon. So I was with First Force Recon. And if you ever, like in the Navy, they have Navy SEALs, Army has Army Special Forces. In the Marines, we had Force Recon. So I was with First Force Recon, mission oriented, did that for a lot of years. And then after that, the LAPD, it was really boring. People think that when they watch TV shows about police officers like the LAPD, they think it's like really exciting and the shooting and all this kind of stuff. No, there was none of that. None of that. My years on with the LAPD, not once did I pull out my service weapon. Not once. It was more of using communication, I think, more than anything else, being able to deal with people. And sometimes I would get into physical altercations, but even that was rare. I think it was like really understanding humans. And then I used a lot of hypnosis techniques. And then towards the end of my LAPD time, I had studied neurolinguistic programming. So that was like 41 years ago. And then I left that in 1981, the LAPD, in the fall of 1981. Then went on to my own adventures, whether it was as a bodyguard, teaching women self-defense, running different businesses, but also continuing studies in different educations. I have like 5 bachelors, 3 masters, 2 PhDs. So that's continuing through, besides being an entrepreneur, which, again, one of the things when I think about like my life and especially in the 80s, and I look at my generation, there was an interesting dichotomy. Like when I look at like future generations, whether Gen Xers or millennials and now Gen Zs, I think my generation kind of did a disservice to future generations. And a lot of us older people, we try to blame the younger generations as being really bad. It turns out that the generation I'm in, we were known as the me generation. We only cared about ourselves, and we started building on that. The 80s was a big scale up in acquiring things, bigger homes. So prior to that, the average size home was about 1,200 square feet, and it more than doubled to 2,500 square feet in size. That's because of my generation. So you got more cars, you got more expensive cars, you got this, and this, and this. And then we try to, like in the 80s, my generation also created the self-esteem movement, and it affected the millennials later on. It just was horrific when I look back on it, and I look at what we've done. And now I look at the world as being regressed in a lot of ways. So I was part of that generation. I am part of that generation, and I have to accept responsibility for my contribution in terms of that. And I really want to be able to shift. And I've been in terms of that, whether studying psychology, advancing more in terms of higher level thinking, which I want to teach now, and so forth. So we can be able to move forward and me with others be able to make a difference. And I know that I can't do it alone. I can offer my piece to the bigger puzzle on how we as humans can come together as a family, all of us. And it doesn't matter where we're from, to come together as a family. And again, I'm on that journey. I'm still learning, and what I've learned throughout my life as I turn 70 this year, I want to continue that contribution in the best way that I can.
Thank you, Bob, for your answer, and thank you for telling about yourself. So exciting to listen about your journey. And what touched me is that you mentioned the problem of consumer society we are living at the moment, and that we faced the result of this me and for me approach to life. And right now, I would ask our technical support to show us the video about a short video about how the project Creative Society started.
The first step would be for everybody to care about other people and not about themselves only.
People should respect each other, not dependent with the color, the gender.
We must avoid all this confrontation, you know.
The fact that we're all humans is what unites us.
But I think you start to think of yourself more as a person from the planet.
The task of the media is to help society find a common language and communicate.
I think friendship and being nice to each other can unite everyone.
I want to live in a society where the people are very conscious, so they make conscious decisions.
Work for the sake of society, for the sake of love, for the sake of connection.
I see that all people want two things: love and respect.
A compassionate society, a society that understands that your needs are validated.
What unites us is being in relationship with each other.
It's about humanizing the human society.
Everybody has to be informed in a proper way.
Let's support each other. Let's help each other, no matter what another person may have.
In the Creative Society, human life will be of highest value, and the best human qualities will prevail.
That was excellent. In fact, one of my friends was in that piece, Bindu.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. So she's a friend of mine and my business partner, Dr. Sophie Nabani. Oh.
Yeah, so it's so inspiring that around the globe, so many people, they are just trying to build something new, something inspiring, something different.
Yes. Yes.
And something that, sorry.
No, which is interesting because when I think about like the shift downward in terms of our society, where we needed to start rising in terms of the way we think, and I go back to the end of the 17th century, where like Sir Isaac Newton, where he came up with a lot of his work and everything like that, and then John Locke, who was a philosopher and who had talked about the shift where we need to start thinking at a higher level, and instead of all the dogma that was happening prior to that. So at that time was born the Age of Enlightenment, which is interesting because the Age of Enlightenment ended in the early 19th century, and today we actually have regressed, particularly here in the United States, we have regressed as a society to pre-Age Enlightenment thinking. In fact, the forefathers of the United States, they were actually born and raised to the Age of Enlightenment. And Thomas Jefferson, when he wrote the Declaration of Independence, he wrote it based on a work of John Locke. He actually took actual passages. Then also Thomas Paine, who was a philosopher back then. So one of the things I've been telling people, we need to get back to a higher level of thinking and really embrace it, all of us. Instead of, I noticed that I was reading some of the stuff and watching some of the videos on your site where today we tend to be catering to the lower level mindsets. We need to be, we need to raise that back up again and bring that sense of enlightenment back into our thinking. And from there, we can step it and raise to a sense of transcendence as a whole.
Yeah.
So Bob, you started actually to answer our next question about how do you personally envision creative society where you and your friends and your family and your close ones are happy and live dignified lives. So what are key elements for you, and what should be in creative society, in your opinion?
Yeah. So again, like I said before, when Socrates mentioned know thyself, I think it starts with knowing thyself. I think every single person, they really have to understand themselves, their biases that they bring forth, and really tear apart what they think that they know about themselves in order to expose the truth. Because from there, then you can start working towards finding out what happiness means to you, what joy means to you, all these kind of things. I think people have been fed a bill of goods, and they think that happiness comes from out there, the external form of happiness. But when we focus on what's out there and accumulating these things, we get onto what's known as a hedonistic or hedonic treadmill. So in human beings, we get used to certain things. So we buy this kind of thing, and then we get bored of it, and then we go get the next thing. We get the next thing. We get the next thing. So we start accumulating all these things, and we don't grow. So we have to eliminate that, go back to find out who we are as a person. And the only way we can do is to take off all the layers, go back there, find out what does that happiness mean for me internally? What does it really mean? And only then can we start to move towards true happiness. Yes, there's a foundation. We need a minimum in order to live comfortably and everything like that. We need every human being needs that. But beyond that, we need to go inside and try to discover and work to discover, should I say, that internal happiness. What brings each of us happiness? Because it's not going to happen out there at all. It's just not.
Yeah, it's interesting what you shared about, the whole principle or notion of these layers. They're kind of like an accumulation of all things negative. So it could be a fear, it could be a bit of frustration here, it could be a feeling of discontentment, it could be just a feeling of lack. So all these little bits, they start to form a layer over time. And then what you're saying is, it's fundamental for someone to discover who they really are. But within who they really are, if I can just add a small bit, is they can go through as a daily practice, really determining what it is they want underneath those layers. So an example could be if they've got some discontentment or some frustration towards person A, rather than putting so much thought and energy into it, to discover what you're saying, who you really are, which is the bigger bit, they can start smaller by just discovering what it is they want within that relationship. So to go underneath the layer and get closer to who they are by having that mindset, because you talked about mindset earlier as well. Mm-hmm. So to having the mindset of someone that can shift into a pivotal mode of pivoting towards what it is they want under each of those bits of unnecessary layers. And then as they get removed, they can really shine. And then it goes back to what you're saying, is then we can all more collectively collaborate and have more unity and work together, because that's what you hinted at before as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when we start digging all that out, I know Carl Jung talks about the shadow, and we all have a shadow self, and the shadow is neither negative or positive. In essence, it's that hidden layer within us that we have tamped down. So we end up, for the most part, people have this ego that they want to build up the ego and show it to others. I did the same thing. Part of my thing was that because I was running an international martial arts organization, and a lot of the people, a lot of instructors under me, and they're all over the world. So in order for me to have a certain look about them, they wanted somebody who had that like military attitude, the mean attitude and everything like that. So my projection was that's what they saw. That was a mask that I was wearing, was maintaining that, instead of this other part that I kept tamped down, that, you know, like really caring. And even though it's been there, you know, like me wanting to be Superman, I really cared to help other people in some form or another. And so that was tamped down. I exposed this really tough Marine veteran, high-level martial artist, fighter, all this kind of stuff. And the truth is, that really wasn't me. Yes, it was a component, but the real me that was in my shadow needed to come out. And the projection, we will project all out. So like when we make a judgment of somebody else, that's our shadow. When we say certain things, and we maybe have a mask of a nice person, but in truth is our shadow comes out. So we need to have that exposed as well. And that's another component. So I had to have that exposed, that saying, yeah, people are saying, yeah, you're really a nice guy. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm mean and I'm tough. No, you're a nice guy. So I had to allow that part to come out and start listening to people. So
interesting. Yeah, thanks for elaborating. So Dr. Choat, well, I can say with absolute certainty that you're definitely a jack of all trades. And I mean, I thought I was, but I mean, clearly I've got some catching up to do. You've just got so many pieces to your repertoire.
So we're both polymaths. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, even when you gave your bio, you'd only really shared some of it. There's other kind of facets or schools or, you know, subject areas that you specialize in as well. So sure. Because of your, let's say, multifaceted repertoire of skills and trades and stuff, I want to ask you a question about the education system. And because you're a trainer and you've trained so many different people in so many different subjects, and you take such a holistic approach, the question is, how do you envision the education system in creative society? As number one. And number two is, what would you introduce?
Yeah, so if we go back to our traditional education system that we see from both the secondary level and all the way up to your typical graduate level. And this is a system that was developed in the early 19th century because they needed to teach a lot of people to just the fundamentalist stuff, but they never ever got to mastery. And I think what I envision is to bring back a sense of mastery. And in the old days, we had the master apprentices in different trades and skills and everything like that, where the master would make sure that the apprentice reached a certain level as they moved up. So they had a master each level. This was a way, the same way in martial arts prior to like I would say the mid or the 3/4 of the 20th century on forward, because they had students mastered, including in the martial arts. And later, as the Japanese came in and they started teaching the children, they simplified it. They taught it in mass. To this day, it's even gotten worse, where you have mass classes and nobody really ever masters something. So we need to have people who have high-level skills to come into the Creative Society to teach a smaller group. And I think the max is like 6 that you can teach in order to develop the kind of skill sets that's going to be needed to help people to be able to move through different levels. So I think we need to embrace that, get back to mastery and excellence, and especially in developing creativity. I think we need to, even going back to that aspect, that our educational system, traditional educational system as we know it, has eliminated creativity. We just don't see it as a society. As we progress, creativity drops. And there was an experiment known as the spaghetti marshmallow challenge, and in that challenge they asked, they had like different groups. They had like CEOs, they had engineers, they had recent graduates of business school and other graduates and everything like that, and they challenged each group to take the spaghetti. They had 20 pieces of dry spaghetti, a marshmallow, tape, and a foot long, 1 yard or 1 meter long of tape and 1 meter long of string, and to build the highest possible tower that they can. And it turned out, so the average height was about 20 inches that they built. The smallest tower was the recent graduates of business school. These were MBAs. People had their MBA. They had built an average tower of 10 inches because they got stuck in the structure of our traditional education system. The ones that built time and again the tallest tower were recent graduates of kindergarten. You're talking about 5 and 6 year olds. They were building towers an average of 28 inches tall, because they weren't stuck in that mindset. So I think we need to have a shift, learn from them. And
wow.
Yeah. So
amazing.
Yeah. So we need, in essence, going back to the basics when we start teaching even kids, but don't tear apart the creativity. Don't get them stuck in a structure where they have to think a certain way. Allow them to expand. Because when we allow them to expand in terms of our education, yes, strive for mastery, but allow them to really grow from that. And if they have to go outside and find other resources, do that. And also the instructors should not.
It sounds great.
Yeah. So
Bob,
again,
it's like, creative education in creative society.
Correct.
I really like it.
So the reason those 5 and 6 year olds, they didn't fear failure. They prototyped. They built something. If it didn't work the first time, they prototyped till they got it tall. And the MBA graduates, they plan till they finally, at the end, where they thought they had a perfect plan, they built it, and they only was able to get 10 inches because everything else fell apart. Oh, but they were stuck in the educational dogma of thinking one way, and it doesn't work in real life if we allow ourselves to expand and have that more of the creative mindset. And by the way, my business partner, Dr. Sophie Nabani, she actually wrote a book called Optimize Your Creative Mindset. So in terms of that.
It's a good point. It's really a good point. Bob, what about unity? You have such a great experience in relations, communications, and all these interactions with so many different people. And could you please tell your opinion on what unites all people, what unites everyone, regardless religion, race, skin color, status, and so on? What is it?
Yeah, I think what really unites everybody is that all of us really want happiness. I think, and I think that's really, really important. And I noticed in a video that we watched earlier, respect is part of that. But people really want to find happiness, and they need to find out, what that is. And as human beings, finding happiness is not doing it alone. We need to be able to reach across every single culture and really learn to understand. So happiness is part of that. And we want to be understood. Every single person wants to be understood. And the only way we're going to be able to understood is to learn to understand others. And and same thing with compassion. In order for us to have compassion for others, we need to have compassion for ourselves as well. And that was a lesson that I learned a long time ago. Once I had compassion for myself, I was able to have compassion for my father in terms of what he did to that younger version of me, and being able to get past that. And so I was able to forgive him, then have compassion for him prior to him passing in 1983. And I look back on it, including when I was bullied as a child. I have compassion for all those because there's a reason why they got to where they got to. So I think that as human beings, we need to be able to have both self-compassion, and from there we have compassion for others. But so I think us all coming together and uniting, we need to have all those factors.
Yeah, great answer. Absolutely. Because just to say one small thing, when we really understand people and come from a mode of respecting them, because you did say that you noticed it in the earlier video, and that respect is intertwined or connected to valuing people. So when we have that as the benchmark, is what you're saying as well, like valuing and respecting them, then it's easier to unite with people, because it just requires an understanding of whether it be a different race or a religion or status. And I know that you being a Jeet Kune Do instructor, and you also, being a big fan of Bruce Lee, that, your approach of having no way as way. So that is easier when we understand people, and by getting to know them from a more curious and respectful kind of mode, rather than what is this. So coming from a more respectful mode, then we can unite more. That's pretty much what you're saying.
Yes. Excellent. Great answer.
Thank you. So after talking to millions of people all over the world, the stages and foundations of building the Creative Society was formed and described in an article which you can read on ALLATRAunites.com. So our viewers can check this out. And we can ask now the technical team to show the video. So these are the 8 foundations coming up, and that's the article. So Dr. Choat, can you share, as we read it, sorry. So, Dr. Choat, what's your opinion on the foundations? Do you rate them? What do you think of them?
Yeah, I actually enjoyed going through each one of them, and there were several that actually stood out. One of them was human safety, and we know that through research that let's go into an educational system. We know that when children feel safe in an educational institution, they learn much better. They have joy. They're not in a fight or flight way of thinking, which we know that under stress, under duress, when your mind is engaged in that, your higher level thinking goes away. In fact, in terms of neuroscience perspective, you almost have, so under that fight or flight, your brain's prefrontal cortex is not even engaged. It's kind of like having a frontal lobotomy, eliminating that part. So when we feel safe, when all people feel safe, we could become not only higher level thinkers, but also higher level creative thinkers. And when we can become higher level creative thinkers, we can start now to engage how we can make a difference. How can we create solutions, even through challenges and problems and everything? We can now open up and look at those. I can see, like this problem I hear, and as I learn new different ways, for example, I mentioned systems thinking, so I can bring in that perspective and look at the systems as a whole, seeing where the problem in a system, where it's at, and maybe work with other people to fix those problems. And so now the system can flow in a much better way. But we need to be able to have children. We need to have people have that sense of safety instead of getting into this whole fight, flight, freeze kind of thing. Yeah, and again, there's so many things I could talk about in terms of each one of those, and I like the way it was structured. So,
yeah, thank you. I mean, the foundations were formed from asking people all around the world, and because we kept that fundamental, like the fundamental question of what type of world you would like to live in, all the responses we got, we just started to see patterns, and then that's how they were formed. So it seems to resonate with so many people around the world. So, yeah, thanks for sharing your input. Eleanor, would you like to ask Dr. Bob Choat another question?
Yeah, I have one. So, please, could you tell us what can every person do in order to make himself better, a better person, and make this world, this society better? So what could be the first actions, maybe decisions taken? What could you recommend?
Yeah, so I stated earlier, know thyself. That is always going to be the foundation. And the second thing I'm going to suggest is to start to think critically. Because when we make decisions, most people will just throw out a gut decision or an emotional based decision and not have a critical analysis on that decision. And when you don't have a critical analysis, that's where mistakes get made. And I'm not saying like always have that, because a lot of times we had to make decisions really fast depending on the circumstance. But when when we get into creative mode, we go out and we create something, including making changes in ourselves. We test it out in a real world. And then once we test it, then we get feedback from that. Then we develop a critical analysis on that feedback. So in terms of personal development, this is true personal development or self-development. Unlike a lot of the surface level stuff that we hear in the personal development world, some are good, some are bad, but we need to have that. We need to continue work on ourselves in terms of that way in whatever we're doing, whatever we want to master ourselves. We need to continue doing this so we can start to evolve at a higher level. Otherwise, we're going to get into a devolvement. We start dropping down. So that's my take on it.
Thank you. I really like that you said creative mode. So we need just to switch to creative mode, and that's it.
Yes.
Yeah. We've already mentioned that the informational stage is the first stage of building the creative society. So, Dr. Choat, my next question is, what do you think is the best way to inform people, to let them know about the Creative Society project? What are your suggestions, or what would you suggest?
Yes, I think especially like in today's world, because we're so filled with information, and we do have to, because I mentioned the emotional part and people doing a critical analysis, yet people are going to be pulled in with emotions. That's what's going to get them to take actions. So I think what needs to be done, the information part needs to be addressed in a way that will have a person feel on an emotional basis, and then deliver content and everything like that on that. Pull them in, because that's where they get like the buy-in part. So pull them in, and then from there, deliver information that's going to have them thinking higher, based on the foundations that they have established. I think that's very key, and find out where each one like will resonate more, because some people will have like one of the points that's going to resonate with him or her more than others. Start right there, then expand out from there. I think that's important, but you have to grab them emotionally first. That's really, really key.
Interesting.
Thank you so much. And let's remind our viewers that in our conversations, we use the principle of 6 handshakes in order to reach people and talk to each other about creative society. And what's unique, that it's run by volunteers, and just people started finally to talk to people. And it's really inspiring. So, Dr. Choat, please, whom would you like to nominate next for our conversation? With whom would you like to talk, and maybe to be host or co-host to talk about society of tomorrow that we can build together?
Well, I did mention Dr. Sophie Nabhani, but I believe that she was already addressed that from that. So I'm going to mention, in terms of a health expert, if you don't mind, I want to bring in Dr. Lori Shemek.
It's open to everyone, yeah.
Yeah, so Dr. Lori Shemek, and she's a health expert out of Texas, and like me, she has her PhD in psychology, but she's very well-grounded in terms of her area of nutrition, and she's very well known in that area. So I think she would be a perfect fit. She has a huge following as well.
Okay, brilliant. So we can just catch up on that, and yeah, you can refer her to us. So, Elena.
I just wanted to say thank you, our guest, Dr. Bob Choat, that you accepted our invitation. It was absolute pleasure to talk to you and to have this one more opinion about the society we live today and what can we build together tomorrow. And I want to tell our viewers that everyone that joins the project, they are people of different areas, that they are people who are doing this and they are free from work time, they are volunteers from different countries. So if you are interested, you also can join. Just go to ALLATRA United's website and press the button join, and you can be a guest, or you can be a host or co-host, and also be part of this beautiful process where people are doing their best in order to create happy society where we all live in good and welcome conditions. So please join us, and maybe you have any ideas, also send email and find us in social media. It's I can tell from myself that it's really a great opportunity just to feel how much people in the world share the same views and they really want to live in a happy society.
Thank you, Dr. Bob Choat, for your time today. It was amazing, just your wisdom and knowledge and experience. I'd like to thank all the viewers for watching. Of course, my co-host Elena, thanks to the viewers. So we'll have to see you all next time. We can build a world that humanity deserves, but we can only do it all together, united by one goal.
Yeah, and everyone matters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.